Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another breakdown of the college football playoff picture, courtesy of Austin Mock, using my college football projection model and simulate the season, have an algorithm that predicts the playoff. And as you can see on the screen, if you're tuning in, you can see my projected bracket as it currently stands heading into week 6 after a crazy week 5 of the college football season. If you haven't tuned into this before, I'm just going to break down kind of each team, go on to the bubble a little bit, see which teams are on the bubble, which teams are need some work, need some help. And I'll be comparing that to kind of the betting market because there's going to be some teams. I'm sure there's at least one team on that bracket that you're seeing that you don't agree with or you think is too high. But I'm going to compare these numbers to kind of what the betting market is looking like, so I can just say that it's not just me that thinks Notre Dame is one of the teams that's likely to make the playoff here. So getting into it last week, as you can see with the up-down arrows, courtesy all this bracket can be seen with the Athletic. As long we did a bubble watch this week, all my college football content as well as NFL. So you can head over to the Athletic and see the great content that we're putting out. But yeah, this bracket is up at the Athletic. The red and green arrows, you can see every spot after the crazy week 5 of college football is a new team outside of Ohio State, who's your number 1 overall seed again, and Tulane, who's your top group of 5, slotted in at the 12 seed there. So looking at this, no real surprises for me. I think everybody's going to gravitate towards Notre Dame being the 8 seed there. But Oregon moving up to 2 is not crazy. Miami at 3. I think Ole Miss might surprise some people, but again, they're off to a great start. You can't really argue too much with where they're landing. Texas A&M is up there. Again, win games and you're going to move up into the bracket. Penn State drops down to 6 with their home loss to Oregon. Georgia drops down to 7, which might surprise some people because then they're right now slated for a rematch with Alabama, who they just lost to at home. Alabama slated to be the 10 seed. Then you got Notre Dame and Texas Tech as your 8 and 9, and Indiana rounding it out at the 11 seed. Notre Dame a little surprising. That's the big topic. I'll start with them. If we scroll down to the table again, this is all on the Athletic. Head over there if you want to get a little bit more detailed. We have the history for each week. You can see how your favorite team bounces up and down. But Notre Dame at 54%. It seems high, and I am high compared to the betting market. If you just want another number to kind of reference, Notre Dame's probably low 40s projected in the betting market over at FanDuel right now. I think we're probably ignore my alarm there. I think it's fair. Maybe if you kind of, I'm going to obviously be biased towards my model, but I think it's probably, I think they're around 50% to make the playoff. And the schedule is incredibly easy. We just saw their toughest test is USC. They get that game at home. We just saw USC have to travel across the country. Now, that was an early start. Don't get me wrong. That's a tough spot. But against an Illinois team that I think is worse than Notre Dame, and that's it. Like, that's the toughest game. You're talking like they bring the home game against Boise heading into the year. Maybe you thought that was going to be a little difficult. Boise's been a little uninspiring. Home against NC State should be a cakewalk. USC, again, that's the tough one. At Boston College should be a win. Home against Navy should be a win. At Pitt, home against Syracuse, at Stanford. If they beat USC, I don't want to say it's a cakewalk, but it's pretty close to a cakewalk to 10-2. And the problem with that, in my mind, the problem with this is I think 10-2 gets them in. I don't think there's a world where there's enough 10-2 teams to outlast them. I think that's highly unlikely right now, and that's why I am probably higher than the market. Their lowest win probability is 74% against USC. Their highest or next one is Pitt at 77. So you're seeing like an 80% chance to win all these games. I do think I'm probably. It's just statistically unlikely for these other teams to get up. Like you're talking about if we scroll down here, the other teams that need to pass them up. You're talking about, Alabama's behind them, sure, but like the schedule's super difficult. You want to go look at Alabama, 9-3 is their most likely record. Notre Dame is projected to win more games than them right now. That's not my numbers. That's at the betting markets. Indiana, sure, that's an argument. They're 10-2. I think they have an argument to move over them. Texas, they have 9-3. Again, that's their most likely record. Not just my numbers, that's betting market as well. I don't think the Big 12 is in a position to get two teams in. So I don't like, even though I'm high on, that's another team that I'm high on, Iowa State, compared to market, they've been banged up. Like Louisville, another team, I don't think they're getting in over Notre Dame. So like Tennessee needs to go 10-2. That's unlikely. Their win total right now, FanDuel's 8.5. My most likely record for them is that 9-3. Missouri, same thing. Let me pull up their record. What do we have here? Yeah, they're 8.5. Juice to the under, so they're far away from getting there. Oklahoma's a tricky one because of the Mateer injury. We'll see when he's able to get back. These numbers do reflect him being out for 3 more weeks. I have it in there. I know there's been some outside chance at him playing against Texas here in a few weeks, but the initial report was like a month. That's kind of what I'm sticking to. I'm not trying to play the games. Michigan, do we think they're going 10-2? Do they think they're winning out? And then, they can lose to Ohio State at home, sure, but like, what's again their best win? They're probably in over at 10-2, but like, do we think Michigan in their current state of their offense is getting to 10-2? LSU, another team, like you're getting down here. Michigan is 8.5 at the win total, juice heavily to the over. LSU, 8.5 win total, juice to the under. So this is where it is. It's kind of like a process of elimination. In that I don't think, my model doesn't think, I personally don't think, it seems like the betting market does not think either, that Notre Dame has a very easy schedule. I think they're 77th in my projections to get back to the, 77th hardest remaining schedule. Everything's lining up for them to go 10-2 and get in. 9-3 I think is a much more difficult conversation because I think they do lose out tiebreakers to a lot of the teams that I just mentioned if they go 9-3 as well. But 10-2 they're in. I'm sorry. There's not enough teams. You look at my numbers. Like Penn State is their most likely record. Is probably they're at 10-2, so they're ahead of them. They're gonna be ahead of them. You want to talk about wins? If they're gonna probably if they go 10-2, they'll have a win over Indiana or Ohio State. But outside, like Texas A&M is closer to 9-3. Penn State's not far off from Georgia. Like all these teams, there's not enough teams left that either are undefeated or likely to continue to be undefeated to knock out Notre Dame. So if you don't like Notre Dame, that's fine by me. 10-2 Notre Dame's going to make the playoff. I think that's pretty. I'm pretty confident in that. It would take a pretty unlikely event to happen, a bunch of unlikely events to happen for Notre Dame to not make it. So, yeah, that's why they're there. They're the 8th seed. Again, guys, this thing, I can preface it that the committee can change their mind and value strength of schedule more. There's been rumors of that. We'll see how that goes. But they have 2 losses to current top 6 teams by a combined 4 points. They probably do need to root for USC to win some games. USC beating Michigan would be pretty big. They really needed USC to hold on in that Illinois game on Saturday. But, win games and you're going to make the playoff. They're not going to just put a bunch of like 8-4, 9-3 SEC teams into the playoff. That's not going to happen. So 10-2 Notre Dame in the playoff. Their schedule is super easy. The offenses look great. Defense is a little, work in progress. We'll see what happens there. But, I am fully bought in on Notre Dame at 10-2. I think people are underrating them right now. I think that's a safe thing to say here. So that's the first thing. Moving on through the rest of the bracket. Oregon and Ohio State, I have them both above 90. Miami's getting there as well. Miami has the tough game against Florida State this week. Should be a fun game. I was talking to a colleague about how this is like the one rivalry I wish both teams could be good, because even though I'm not quite old enough, like that's one of the college football rivalries that sticks with me the most. But if Miami beats Florida State, they're going to be in the mid 90s. There's a chance. I just want to throw it out. There's a chance that Miami is the number one overall seed in my projected bracket if they win this weekend. Florida State's pretty much out. They go down to like a 5% chance. And then if they lose, Miami's still looking good. They're still in the 80s. I have them down to 82% if they don't win. Florida State goes up to 28 there. So Miami's looking good. Oregon, same thing. 91%. Their schedule's there. Like I was saying, Ole Miss is where it starts to get a little bit interesting. I think people are a little surprised by how high I have Ole Miss. If you want to debate it, that's fine. I think I am a little bit high, kind of similar to Notre Dame here. But over at FanDuel, they're sitting in the, I'd say like 64, 65% chance of getting there. Their win total is 10.5 juiced under pretty heavily. So they're expected to go 10-2. You look at the rest of their schedule. I'm telling you, it's just win games, guys. They are 5-0. They have Washington State. They got to go to Georgia. They got to go to Oklahoma. Obviously, it's going to be pretty big, depending on if Mateer's back for that game. We'll see how that looks. It's undetermined. But then it's home against South Carolina, home against the Citadel, home against Florida State, then at Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl. Mississippi State's a tricky game. Don't get me wrong. Egg Bowl is always crazy. No longer Thanksgiving night, unfortunately. But that schedule's manageable. They could lose to Georgia and Oklahoma and still have a good 10-2. You're in. Definitely. Like if I'm saying that 10-2 Notre Dame is in, with their best win being USC, you can bet every dollar you have that 10-2 Ole Miss is in with wins over LSU. In this case, that have Florida and South Carolina, and Mississippi State's pretty solid. They're 4-1. So I'm just throwing it out there that these are the teams. If you get to 10-2, is kind of like that. If you get to 10 wins, you got to feel pretty good about where you are in the playoff race. So I think the schedule is really easy for Ole Miss. Super fortunate. They'll have a chance to get an automatic bid if 10-2 kind of, in my mind, kind of looks like you could still make the SEC playoff or championship game. So yeah, that's why they're that high. I have their schedule as pretty manageable. Like I told you, there's 2 games. A lot's going to depend on Mateer. Mateer's a big factor in this. But Ole Miss is, remaining strength of schedule is 28th, so it's not easy. But compared to some other, Oklahoma has the hardest remaining schedule. Mississippi State is the second hardest. Vanderbilt the third. Arkansas the fourth. You have to go down to the 9th hardest team to see that Wisconsin has the 9th hardest remaining schedule, to find someone outside of the SEC. And so I think if you're Ole Miss and you're sitting here with the 28th hardest schedule, you got to feel pretty good about your about your chances there. So that's where I'm at with Ole Miss. Next team on the list, Texas A&M. They're your 5 seed. Get Tulane in the quarterfinals. Again, 4-0, so they do have to win one more game. Mississippi State, home against Florida. To Arkansas, that feels like that should be a win as well. Then you get into a little bit tougher stretch here of at LSU, at Missouri, home against South Carolina, home against Stanford, and then at Texas. This is why they're below Ole Miss. They've won one less game, and they have a tougher schedule. They have the 11th toughest remaining schedule. That's why they get there. They've played the 16th so far. Like, this is why Texas A&M is shooting up there for me. They have a really impressive resume, where as compared to Ole Miss, 37th toughest. So Texas A&M, again, 10-2. This is one of those things, though, if I do think if they both finish with the same record, I would say Texas A&M probably gets the nod in my projections. But right now, as you can see on the screen there with the projected record, I think Ole Miss has a good chance of being a win ahead of Texas A&M by the time the season ends. So 6, Penn State. Disappointing game. You don't have to hear it from me. think everybody's kind of covered it. Didn't move the ball for 3 quarters. Disappointing interception at the end to lose. At the end of the day, Oregon looks like a pretty solid team. I do. Here's the thing with Penn State and James Franklin. They don't lose games that they're not supposed to. And when you look at the rest of the schedule, at UCLA, home against Northwestern, at Iowa, at Ohio State, home against Indiana, at Michigan State, home against Nebraska, at Rutgers. I don't think they're not going to lose to UCLA. They're not going to lose at home to Northwestern. They're not going to lose to Nebraska at home. I don't believe. They're not going to lose at Rutgers. So there's 4 games in there. At Iowa, I don't think Iowa has the defense that they've had in years past. I think there's maybe there's a chance if you get the offense on an off game. Like, listen, Drew Howard hasn't played well. I don't think the offensive line has played well. Nick Singleton's been he's been in a funk. He hasn't got it going yet. So it's not just one thing. The offense is struggling, but I think Iowa's offense is not where it needs to be, and Penn State's defense is good enough, despite the loss of Tony Rojas this week in practice. So 10-2, you're in. They're projected for a 10-2 record right now. My numbers do have 9-3 more favorably, just because that's kind of how the projection style works when you're taking 5-10% off of every game. UCLA win, Northwestern win. I think it personally comes down to probably the at Iowa game. I don't think Indiana has the athletes to come in and win in Beaver Stadium. Iowa game, do you not have that bad offensive game against Iowa where I think they knew it. They did it a couple years ago. They absolutely destroyed Iowa. I think Aller had like a 3 yards per attempt against them. Just pitch and catch down the field. You have better athletes. I think they'll win. So, can't drop again. They cannot. I don't think Penn State's kind of in the Notre Dame thing. I don't think they can go 9-3. Looking at their schedule, 89th easiest schedule or 89th toughest schedule so far. 36 to end the year. Obviously, a lot of that is the Ohio State. And Indiana winning would be beneficial to Penn State as well because Indiana's looked pretty good. And right now they're a projected playoff team. So, 7 Georgia. I mentioned the tough schedules for SEC teams. Georgia, why they're so high is because I have them as the 27th hardest remaining schedule in the country, or 25th, sorry, which is very, like I said, the top 8 teams are all SEC teams. Then you got Texas A&M at 11, Texas at 13, LSU at 15, Alabama at 17. Auburn at 22, so like Tennessee at 23. So 25th is a pretty manageable schedule. And when you look at it, they're 3-1, so they got to win some games. But home against Kentucky, at Auburn, home against Ole Miss, neutral site against Florida, at Mississippi State, home against Texas, home against Charlotte, and then neutral site in Atlanta against Georgia Tech. So it's not an easy, path. I don't think that's why they're only at 54% per my numbers. It's not a cakewalk by any stretch of the imagination. If you look at FanDuel, they're projecting them more likely at 9-3 than 10-2. You're going to see that be a recurring theme. Think back to my Notre Dame talk from off the top there. But they're right now probably sitting at, I think, mid-50s. I'm pretty much on market with FanDuel in terms of their odds of making the playoffs. So I feel pretty good with where Georgia stands in the bracket right now. I already talked about Notre Dame. I'll skip over them. Texas Tech, they are I do have them a pretty decent chance. This is one I'll get on this will be a soapbox every week for me, is I do have them with a decent chance of getting an at-large bid. And I'm a little high on, like 47%. That's probably similar to where the market has them right now. I know I'm a little high on Iowa State if we go down, just kind of talking about the Big 12 in general. But they're the favorite to win the Big 12 in my mind at 30%. They are a little bit higher than that in market. I think that's a little bit giving a little bit too much credit there. So that's why I think I'm a little bit high on the Big 12 at-large possibility. And that's why, again, we get back into this whole discussion about where do we if they change how they do the schedule. That's what I'm nervous about. Or strength of schedule metric. If the committee decides, hey, we're going to, give these strength of schedule a little bit extra boost, so pretty much every conference except for the SEC is going to come down a good bit. in my mind. So that is a concern there. But Texas Tech, rightful favorite. I think 11-1. That's where you get in that SMU territory of getting that large bid. And the schedule is not terrible. At Houston, home against Kansas. At Arizona State, home against Oklahoma State. At Kansas State, home against BYU, home against UCF. At West Virginia. When you look at Texas Tech's schedule, they played the 34th toughest schedule. They got the 60th remaining toughest schedule. Iowa State's at 62. Arizona State at 51. They're in a harder level than them. So that's kind of where I sit. Like I'm not a huge believer in Utah. Utah is the 37th remaining toughest schedule. So Texas Tech, they're in a prime position, and I think they have the schedule to work out for them as well. The rest of the way. Same with Iowa State. That's why those two are at the top. Texas Tech gets the bid, and that's why Iowa State's there is on the bubble. Alabama at 10. One, they already have a loss. We'll just start off there. They're playing behind. Florida State lost to Virginia, so Florida State, that loss is not looking as good. Home against Vanderbilt this weekend. I do think they win that game. I think Vanderbilt is severely overrated. At Missouri, not an easy game. Home against Tennessee. At South Carolina. Home against LSU. Home against Oklahoma. Home against Eastern Illinois. At Auburn. I've said, like, Alabama had one of the toughest schedules in the country coming in. They've played the 4th toughest schedule. They have the 17th hardest remaining schedule. You can see why I have them only 10th. You like Georgia, like, oh, they just beat Georgia. How is Georgia ranked ahead of them? It's the schedule. I just told you, Georgia's the 25th hardest remaining schedule. Alabama's the 17th. Like, it's a different level of team. Like, consistently, Alabama has to go play every single week, be perfect. I mean, I guess they don't have to be perfect. They're probably the team that's best to be a 9-3 and get the at-large bid, similar to last year. A lot's gonna depend on. They would probably shoot up in this if I had to make an adjustment to how the algorithm is counting for the playoff selection. They'd probably go up, but 44% to make the playoff. We look at FanDuel; they're much higher on, and that's where I think this is my difference. They're in the low 60s. This is probably where I am slightly off. You could probably converge these, get in the mid-50s number, and be more exact. You'd probably see Notre Dame come down a bit. You'd see the Big 12 teams come down a bit. This is the difference in where my numbers are starting to get weird and how much, like, the betting market thinks that the SEC, the committee is going to benefit the SEC with their strength of schedule metrics this year. Whether that happens, we'll see. But yeah, the betting market definitely thinks that's going to happen. I have it priced in a little bit, but that's probably something that I'm definitely keeping an eye on, ear to the ground, see how that goes in the future. So yeah, I'm a little bit underrated on Alabama right now. Think they're a really good team, but that schedule is really tough. That's why I personally think, like, if you look at their win total, I'll say this again. Alabama's win total is 9.5 juice towards the under. Like, to get an at-large bid, like, we're assuming a lot of things of them getting an at-large bid in my mind there. Obviously, there's a path to the SEC championship as well. But again, schedule is tough. 17th hardest remaining schedule. Indiana. I did this last year with Indiana after they were 5-0. They were in my stock watch over at The Athletic about how they had a very manageable schedule the rest of the way. This year's is slightly different, I will say. But 5-0, they got to go to Oregon in 2 weeks. That'll be a tough game, obviously. Home against Michigan State, home against UCLA. I think those should both be wins. At Maryland, I don't think is an easy game for them. They should win it, but the tough part about Indiana, like, I think a lot of, like, I know colleagues with their models and numbers, projections, whatever, have Indiana like firmly a top 10 team. I think they're closer to like 15th. I question the athletes, and that's what I like when you have to play that step up, when you have to play the Oregons and the Penn States. I don't know if they have the athletes to get there, for 60 minutes. And then you're talking about you have to go to Maryland. That's not an easy game, but home against Wisconsin and at Purdue, should be easy wins there too. So if they sneak, I mean, obviously they're going to be in. If they sneak one of Oregon and Penn State, those are road wins. That'll go even further for them. But yeah, they can lose to Oregon and Penn State and sweep the rest of their schedule. 10-2. That's the theme. 10-2. They're going to be in. I don't think the argument, like last year, they didn't play a tough schedule. They were 11-1. I don't think it's as much this year because so far 88th easiest schedule. Yeah, they played the 33rd hardest remaining schedule. So don't think it's going to be a situation where you can just say, hey, they haven't played anybody. I think that's going to be a little bit different to them, to where they can get in with that 10-2 mark. You remember they were in firmly last year. They were not one of the teams that was on the bubble in my mind at 11-1. They were firmly in the playoff. Tulane, again, the AAC is going to be the big conference. I'll spend a few minutes here. Boise still has an outside chance, just if the AAC kind of beats up on each other, because it's looking pretty solid. But Tulane's still my top team. A lot of teams are high on Memphis. I'm a little bit lower. Navy's 3-0 in conference, so they kind of have a head start. Navy's a weird one because they would only have 11 games counting towards the playoff rankings. The Army-Navy game is after, so that game wouldn't count. Whether that matters, I don't know. It won't matter because they'll have a championship. They're only getting in with a championship, in my mind. But Memphis 5-0, North Texas is trying to enter the conversation. But so in like Tulane, they already have the loss, goes to Ole Miss. So we'll see. But I think there's firmly, and South Florida's gonna be a tough team to beat too. But like I think Rice is a tricky team. East Carolina's not that. Temple's improved. So I think you could see some losses here, and that's why I think Boise can maybe sneak through. But the fact that they lost to USF makes it tougher. I have them with such a high chance, but such a high chance to win the Mountain West, but only a 9% chance. So North Texas is ahead of them. Who else we got? Memphis, Navy's ahead of them, and Tulane. So Boise is going to need a lot of. Obviously, a win against Notre Dame goes a long way this weekend. Very unlikely, but that's kind of my group of 5 roundup. Teams on the bubble. The one big one here is Texas. I'll probably spend the most time in there because I'm kind of touching everybody else a little bit. I said it before the year. I bet against Texas against Ohio State. I didn't understand the arch love. We just assumed that he was going to come in and be an automatic number 1 overall draft pick after not beating out Quinn Ewers last year. Looked good against Sam Houston, but Sam Houston's one of the worst teams in college football. But yeah, like I don't know. Maybe they're this is again kind of a 9-3 thing. If the 9-3, like if I need to tinker this and make the strength of schedule, a bigger factor in the rankings because it hasn't been to date. Texas obviously is going to be in the playoff. They're the first team out right now. But at Florida, they're only 7-point favorites at Florida. That's what this Texas team is. That's how good the SEC is as well. They do have Oklahoma. I'm assuming they're going to get that game without John Mateer. At Kentucky, that should be a win. At Mississippi State, could be a little dicey. Home against Vanderbilt should be fine in that game. But at Georgia, home against Arkansas, home against Texas A&M. There's some games there. 9-3 Texas. I don't know. Definitely if you factor in that the Oklahoma game without Mateer, I don't know if they'll get hurt by that by the committee standards. But I don't know. I think we're too high on them as a team. We go over to FanDuel. Their projected record right now, win total is 9.5, juice to the under a good bit. So they're firmly, the betting market is saying that they think they're going to be 9-3 at the end of the year. Again, they're in that like high 50s. Projected to make the playoff, high 50s, and I got them at 39. So again, with Alabama and Texas, this is where that 9-3 thing. I probably have I am off market. If I had to guess, I think the betting market is adjusted too much. I probably haven't adjusted enough. It's probably somewhere in the middle there. So coin flip, I think it's probably fair for Texas to make the playoffs. Alabama a little bit better than a coin flip. because I think the betting market's giving too much credit for them to make it at 9-3, where I'm not giving enough. Louisville's in there because of their ability to possibly win the ACC. I don't think Louisville's a very good football team. My worry with Louisville, again, 4-0, so you give them credit, but home against Virginia, they got to go to Miami. Those are two tough games, but, if you win one, you got home against Boston College, at Virginia Tech, home against Cal, home against Clemson, at SMU, and then home against Kentucky. The schedule's not hard. Like, that's the big thing. 39th hardest remaining schedule, 99th pass so far. I didn't mention Texas at 30. Texas has the 13th remaining toughest schedule. Talking about them. So, Louisville's is, 12% chance to win the ACC, which, again, I think is probably a little bit high. It might be underrating Miami a bit. 32%. It's the same thing. ACC and Big 12 teams, when I'm talking about Alabama and Texas being shot up, the ACC and Big 12 are going to be shot down. So, if you want to say I have to take a little bit off of that, same thing with if I have to add a little bit to Texas and Alabama for what their true odds are. If we do think the committee is going to change their strength of schedule metric, the ACC and Big 12 teams, Louisville being one of them, are going to be the teams that need to drop down. So, Tennessee and Missouri, those are interesting. Tennessee, real quick, 23rd remaining toughest schedule. Only the 60th so far. They've had a pretty easy schedule. And then Missouri, 8th toughest schedule. They have played the 105th easiest schedule. So Missouri has an uphill battle just from the fact that their schedule is so difficult. Running down the schedule here, looking at it, they got to go in 2 weeks. They got to face Alabama at home. They got to go to Auburn. They got to go to Vanderbilt. Home against Texas A&M. Home against Mississippi State. At Oklahoma, presumably with John Mateer, and then at Arkansas. They're undefeated, but I do wonder, can they get through there with 2 losses they're going to be in, where they fit in the 9-3 pecking order. Definitely when their schedule, I don't think will be on the level of what, Alabama or Texas is. Tennessee, on the other hand, man, they got to be kicking themselves for blowing that Georgia game with how things have shaked out here. They get by Mississippi State. I don't think Tennessee. I'm skeptical of where they are, but again, already have a loss. Home against Arkansas, at Alabama, at Kentucky. Home against Oklahoma, presumably with John Mateer. Home against New Mexico State, at Florida. Home against Vanderbilt. It's manageable. Gotta only lose one. I don't know if we get there with Tennessee at 9-3. I think like I said, 60th easiest schedule so far. 23rd remaining, so I think from a strength of schedule standpoint, if we're going to boost 9-3 teams because their strength of schedule, I assume you're going to pretty much be ranked by strength of schedule, unless there's some head-to-head factors in there. I think it would go a huge way that at Alabama. If they can win at Alabama, I think Tennessee is obviously their odds are going to skyrocket. After that, we get into Oklahoma. Again, Mateer's the big question mark there. How long is he going to be out? Does he come back effective? Michigan's interesting. I don't think people realize their schedule is pretty manageable. They've played a tough schedule so far. 21st toughest schedule so far, but 53rd remaining. So they do have kind of a chance there. They got to go if they win at USC, that's the big game for them. If they beat USC on the road, tough game going out west, but outside they got home Wisconsin. That's at USC's 2 weekends from now. But home against Washington, they got to go to Michigan State. Home against Purdue, at Northwestern, at Maryland before Ohio State. So maybe that's a little dicey. And then home against Ohio State. They beat USC. They're in a prime position in my mind to get to 10-2. LSU's the next team. Like Georgia Tech's got to win the. I think the ACC. LSU is the last team here I'll talk about at the 25% threshold. Again, already have a loss that game against Ole Miss. They got home against South Carolina, at Vanderbilt, home against Texas A&M, at Alabama, home against Arkansas and Western Kentucky, and then at Oklahoma, presumably with John Mateer back. That's 15th hardest remaining schedule. They played the 7th toughest. 10-2, they're in. 9-3, they will have the argument at large, they're probably another team again that should be bumped up here if you assume that the strength of schedule is going to be changed this year and how that's factored in. But they're not that much higher in the betting market. The no price minus 290, that's almost implying, I'd say I'm only a couple percentage points short on LSU here. So so like I said, you can see all of this, the bracket, the table with all the odds over at The Athletic. I update it every day through every slate of the weekend on Saturday here. Some big games with Miami, Florida State leading the way. And, Vanderbilt, Alabama could be a good game as well. So I do think good weekend ahead. A little bit lighter. I don't know if there will be as much fireworks as we saw last week. But if you want to follow my work, this, again, like I said, it's updated throughout Saturday, updated Sunday morning. Hopefully we had some data issues last week. Hopefully we get that fixed. That's that. That's my roundup. That's the projected bracket as we head into week 6 of the college football season. If you liked it, please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video. Leave your comments if you want to, comment on any of the things. If you disagree with anything I said, which I'm sure there's plenty, please do. So that would be greatly appreciated. As always, enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the college football, NFL, MLB playoffs, whatever it is. Great time for sports right now. But until next time, I'll try to do this again next week and see what has changed going into next week. Hopefully we get some more red and green arrows after this week's game. So until next time, have a good one.